Welcome back to Nordic Legends, where ancient tales come alive. Before we dive into today's incredible story, please hit that like button. If you enjoy mythological content, subscribe for more Viking and dragon legends, and drop a comment telling us where in the world you're watching from. I love connecting with fellow mythology enthusiasts worldwide. Now, let's journey back to the age of Vikings. The morning mist clung to the ancient pine like the breath of sleeping giants, and through this ethereal veil moved a figure that seemed carved from the very essence of the northern wilderness. Ragnar Ironwolf, though few now remembered his true name, had walked these paths for more winters than most men lived. His weathered hands, scarred by countless battles and marked by the deep lines of solitude, gripped his worn axe handle as he navigated the treacherous terrain of the forgotten forest. This was no ordinary woodland. Local settlements whispered that these trees had witnessed the first footsteps of gods, that their roots drank from springs blessed by Odin himself. The forest stretched endlessly northward, beyond the reach of kings and jarls, where only the bravest or most desperate dared to venture. Here, ancient magic still pulsed through every moss-covered stone, every twisted branch that reached toward the pale sky like gnarled fingers seeking benediction from the All-Father. Ragnar's exile had begun 7 winters past, when he had refused his jarl's command to burn a village that harbored his childhood friend. Honor, he had discovered, was a luxury that powerful men could rarely afford to allow in their subordinates. Rather than face execution or submit to demands that would blacken his soul, he had chosen the path of the outcast, a decision that had led him deeper into these mystical woods with each passing season. The forest had become both his sanctuary and his prison. He had learned its moods like a seafarer learns the temperament of the ocean. When the wind shifted to bring the scent of approaching storms, when the unusual silence of birds warned of predators prowling nearby, when the very air itself seemed to thicken with otherworldly presence. His shelter was a crude hut built against a massive boulder, its walls reinforced with pine boughs and sealed with mud and moss. Inside, his few possessions spoke of a life stripped to its absolute essentials: a worn sealskin blanket, a fire-blackened cooking pot, and his father's sword, the only remaining link to the warrior he had once been. Today felt different from the moment he had awakened. The forest's usual chorus of morning sounds, the chatter of squirrels, the distant call of ravens, the rustle of small creatures in the underbrush, had been replaced by an oppressive silence that made his battle-tested instincts prickle with unease. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath, leaving the tall pines unnaturally still against the overcast sky. As he followed a deer path that wound between massive tree trunks, each easily wide enough to house a longship, Ragnar's keen ears detected something that made him freeze mid-step. Voices, human voices, rough and laden with cruel mirth, drifted through the forest from somewhere ahead. His grip tightened instinctively on his axe as he crept forward, using every skill learned through years of hunting both beast and man. The voices grew clearer as he approached, and what he heard made his blood run cold with a familiar rage. These were not lost travelers or fellow outcasts seeking shelter. These were raiders. The kind of men who took pleasure in causing suffering, who measured their worth by the fear they could instill in others. Their accents marked them as foreigners to these lands, probably mercenaries or bandits who had wandered far from their usual hunting grounds. Moving with the silent grace of a born hunter, Ragnar crept closer until he could observe the scene through a screen of low-hanging branches. In a small clearing where ancient stones formed a rough circle, perhaps once a sacred site of the old gods, 3 men had cornered their prey, but their target was not what Ragnar had expected. A wolf pup, barely old enough to have opened its eyes, cowered against one of the moss-covered stones. The small creature could not have weighed more than a few pounds, its fur still bearing the soft texture of youth. It whimpered pitifully as the men closed in, their weapons drawn not for a quick kill, but for the prolonged torment that such men found amusing. "Look at this little beast," snarled the largest of the three, a man whose scarred face and missing teeth spoke of a lifetime of violence. His leather armor was stained with old blood and newer mud, and the crude tattoos covering his arms depicted symbols that Ragnar recognized as belonging to southern raiders. Probably thinks its pack will come save it. The second raider, thin as a blade and twice as cruel, laughed as he prodded the pup with the tip of his spear. "No pack coming for this one. We made sure of that yesterday." His words carried the casual brutality of a man who had long ago forgotten that causing pain could be anything other than entertainment. The third man, younger but no less vicious, kicked at the pup with his boot, causing it to tumble against the stone with a heart-wrenching yelp. Should we skin it alive? The fur might be worth something, even this small. Ragnar felt something deep within his chest ignite, a fury that burned hotter than any hearth fire, more intense than any battle rage he had ever experienced. This was not the calculated anger of a warrior facing armed opponents. This was something primal and pure, the response of a protector witnessing absolute innocence under threat. The pup's eyes, bright blue like chips of winter sky, met his through the undergrowth. In that moment, Ragnar saw something that struck him like a physical blow. Those eyes held an intelligence far beyond what any ordinary wolf should possess, a depth of understanding that seemed almost divine. The pup was not merely an animal. It was something more, something that connected to the deepest mysteries of the forest itself. Without conscious thought, Ragnar burst from his concealment with a battle cry that had not crossed his lips in 7 years. The sound echoed through the forest like thunder, causing birds to explode from the treetops and the very ground to seem to tremble beneath their feet. "Face me, you cowards!" he roared, his voice carrying the authority of a man who had once led warriors into battle against overwhelming odds. "Would you gain glory by torturing a helpless pup?" The three raiders spun toward him, their surprise quickly giving way to the predatory grins of men who saw an opportunity for even greater sport. They spread out instinctively, their movements revealing the practiced coordination of men who had ambushed many victims together. "Well, well," drawled the scarred leader, hefting a battle-axe that had clearly tasted much blood. "The forest sends us a hero. Tell me, old man, do you plan to die defending this little beast?" "If the gods will it," Ragnar replied, raising his own weapon with steady hands. "But you'll find that some deaths come at a higher price than others." "Uldui!" The battle erupted with savage intensity. Ragnar's years of exile had not dulled his fighting skills. If anything, the harsh demands of forest survival had honed them to a razor's edge. His first strike caught the thin raider across the chest, opening a wound that sent him staggering backward with a scream of pain and surprise. But 3 against 1 was always a dangerous gamble, even for a warrior of Ragnar's caliber. As he parried a vicious swing from the leader's axe, the youngest raider's spear found its mark, piercing deep into Ragnar's side. Hot blood flowed freely, staining his worn tunic and dripping onto the forest floor. Pain blazed through his body, but Ragnar fought on with the determination of a man who had found his purpose at last. His axe caught the spear wielder in the shoulder, spinning him around and sending his weapon flying into the underbrush. The wounded thin raider, clutching his chest, attempted to circle behind Ragnar, but a well-placed kick sent him crashing into one of the ancient stones. The leader proved to be the most dangerous opponent Ragnar had faced in years. His axe work was brutal but effective, each swing calculated to wear down his enemy through sheer relentless pressure. Ragnar found himself giving ground, his wound bleeding freely and his movements beginning to slow. "You're dying for nothing, old man," the leader taunted as their weapons locked together. "When you're dead, we'll make that pup suffer twice as much for your interference." Those words ignited something beyond mere anger in Ragnar's heart. With a surge of strength that seemed to come from the forest itself, he broke the weapon lock and delivered a devastating strike that shattered the leader's axe handle. Before the man could react, Ragnar's follow-up blow caught him across the throat, sending him toppling backward to lie still among the ancient stones. The 2 surviving raiders, both badly wounded and thoroughly intimidated by their leader's swift death, fled into the forest. Their panicked crashes through the underbrush faded quickly, leaving Ragnar alone with the wolf pup in the sudden, profound silence. He staggered toward the small creature, his hand pressed against his bleeding side. The spear wound was deep, and he could feel his strength ebbing with each heartbeat, but the pup was unharmed. That was what mattered. As he knelt beside the small wolf, those impossibly blue eyes gazed up at him with what could only be described as gratitude. "You're safe now, little one," Ragnar whispered, his voice rough with pain and exhaustion. Gently, he reached out to stroke the pup's soft fur. The moment his fingers made contact, he felt a strange warmth flow through him, not healing, but something deeper, a connection that seemed to bridge the gap between human and wild. The pup nuzzled against his hand, its small body trembling not with fear now, but with something that felt almost like recognition. Ragnar carefully lifted the creature, cradling it against his chest as he began the slow, agonizing journey back toward his shelter. Each step was a battle against the pain that threatened to overwhelm him. The forest around him seemed to shift and blur as blood loss took its toll. More than once he had to stop and lean against a tree, fighting the darkness that crept in at the edges of his vision. But the warm weight of the pup against his chest kept him moving forward. The sun was beginning its descent toward the horizon when Ragnar finally reached his crude hut. With the last of his strength, he managed to build a small fire and set out water and what little dried meat he had for the pup. The small wolf ate hungrily, its blue eyes never leaving Ragnar's face as he settled against the boulder that formed the back wall of his shelter. As night fell over the forgotten forest, Ragnar felt his life slowly ebbing away. The wound in his side had stopped bleeding, but only because there was less blood left to flow. His breathing grew shallow and labored, each inhalation requiring tremendous effort, yet he felt no fear, no regret. He had lived his last day as a true warrior, defending the innocent against those who would do them harm. The pup curled up against his side, its small body warm against his cooling skin. In the flickering firelight, its fur seemed to shimmer with an otherworldly radiance, and those blue eyes held depths that spoke of ancient magic and divine purpose. "Sleep well, little one," Ragnar whispered into the darkness. "You're safe now." As the fire burned lower and the forest sounds of night began to surround them, Ragnar closed his eyes and let the darkness take him. But even as his mortal body prepared for its final rest, something stirred in the depths of the forest, something ancient and powerful that had been watching, waiting, and judging. The night was far from over, and the true magic was yet to begin. The first light of dawn crept through the canopy like ghostly fingers, painting the forest floor in shades of silver and gold. Ragnar drifted in and out of consciousness, suspended between the world of the living and whatever lay beyond. His breathing had become so shallow that each exhale might have been his last, and the cold of approaching death had settled deep into his bones. But the wolf pup remained pressed against his side, its small body radiating an impossible warmth that seemed to push back against the encroaching darkness. Throughout the long night, whenever Ragnar's spirit had begun to slip away, that warmth had called him back, anchoring him to life by the thinnest of threads. As the morning light grew stronger, a new sound began to filter through the forest, the soft padding of many feet moving through the undergrowth with purposeful intent. Ragnar's battle-trained instinct stirred weakly, trying to rouse his battered body to face whatever new threat approached. But he was far beyond the ability to fight. He could barely manage to keep his eyes open. The sounds grew closer, accompanied by the rustle of bushes and the occasional snap of a twig. Then, like phantoms materializing from the morning mist, they appeared at the edge of the small clearing around his shelter. Wolves, a pack of them, their forms emerging from the forest with an almost supernatural grace. But these were no ordinary wolves. Each stood nearly as tall as a man's chest, their massive frames speaking of strength that could bring down the mightiest elk or bear. Their fur ranged from pure white to deep silver, and their eyes, every single pair, glowed with the same impossible blue as the pup's. At their head walked a female whose presence commanded immediate respect. Her coat was the color of fresh snow, unmarked by any blemish, and she moved with the fluid authority of a born leader. The moment she stepped into the clearing, every other wolf fell silent and still, awaiting her command. Ragnar tried to speak, to warn them away from the pup he had died protecting, but only a weak rasp emerged from his throat. The great white female approached slowly, her massive head lowered as she examined the scene before her. Her nostrils flared as she caught the sense of battle, blood, and impending death that hung heavy in the morning air. The pup stirred against Ragnar's side, lifting its small head to emit a sound that was part whimper, part howl. It was a call that seemed to contain a lifetime of longing, fear, and desperate hope. The moment the sound reached the white female's ears, her entire demeanor changed. She rushed forward with surprising gentleness, her massive form moving with careful precision to avoid jostling Ragnar as she nuzzled the pup. The small wolf responded by climbing onto its mother's back, its tiny claws finding purchase in her thick fur. As it settled into place, something extraordinary began to happen. The pup's fur began to shimmer and change, taking on a luminescence that seemed to come from within. Its small body grew slightly, subtly shifting in proportions that spoke of a heritage far removed from ordinary wolves. Most startling of all, ancient runic symbols began to appear along its sides, glowing with a soft blue light that pulsed in rhythm with its heartbeat. Ragnar's failing vision cleared momentarily as he witnessed this transformation. Through eyes that had seen many wonders and horrors, he recognized the truth that the forest had kept hidden. This was no ordinary wolf pup. This was a descendant of Fenrir, the great wolf of Norse legend, child of Loki, and harbinger of Ragnarok. The white female turned her attention to Ragnar, and in her ancient eyes, he saw an intelligence that transcended the mortal world. She lowered her great head until her muzzle was inches from his face, her warm breath mingling with his own labored exhalations. When she spoke, her voice resonated not in his ears, but directly in his mind, carrying the weight of centuries and the authority of the old gods themselves. Warrior. Her mental voice was like distant thunder, powerful yet somehow gentle. You have given your life to protect what is most precious to us. The child you saved carries the blood of the wolf father, the last of Fenrir's true lineage in Midgard. Ragnar tried to respond, but she continued before he could form words. Your sacrifice has not gone unnoticed by those who watch from the shadows of Yggdrasil. You faced death without hesitation to shield an innocent, asking nothing in return. Such honor demands recognition. Around the clearing, the other wolves began to form a perfect circle, their heads raised toward the brightening sky. As one, they began to howl, but this was no ordinary wolf song. Their voices wove together in harmonies that seemed to resonate with the very foundations of reality, calling out across dimensions to powers that had slept since the world was young. The morning light began to change, taking on an otherworldly quality that made the air itself seem to shimmer. The ancient stones in the clearing where Ragnar had fought the raiders began to glow with the same blue radiance as the pup's markings, revealing them to be not random rocks, but carefully placed markers of a sacred site. The blood you have shed here, the white female continued, mingles with earth that has been sacred since the first trees took root. Your spirit has proven worthy of a gift that few mortals ever receive. You need not pass into the halls of the dead, warrior. Instead, you may choose to remain, to become our eternal guardian and protector. As she spoke, Ragnar felt a strange lightness beginning to spread through his body. The pain of his wound faded, replaced by a sensation of floating, of being lifted beyond the constraints of mortal flesh. He looked down to see his physical form growing translucent, becoming something between solid matter and pure spirit. The transformation was unlike anything he had ever imagined. His earthly body began to take on the same ethereal quality as the morning mist, though he could still feel the wolf pup's warmth against his side. His worn leather armor and simple clothing shifted into garments that seemed woven from moonbeams and shadow, marked with runic symbols that glowed with their own inner light. "What am I becoming?" he managed to whisper, his voice now carrying harmonics that echoed strangely in the sacred space. "You are becoming what you have always been in your heart," the white female replied. "A guardian of the innocent, a protector of those who cannot protect themselves. But now your vigil will be eternal, your strength drawn from the very essence of the forest itself." The pup, now clearly revealed as something far more than an ordinary wolf, climbed down from its mother's back and approached Ragnar's transforming form. As its small paws touched his translucent hand, visions flooded through his consciousness, images of the role he was destined to play in the cosmic balance. He saw himself standing watch over the forest through countless seasons, his spirit form able to manifest physically when threats arose. He witnessed future scenes where lost travelers would find mysterious guidance leading them to safety, where poachers and raiders would flee in terror from a ghostly warrior who appeared from nowhere to defend the forest's creatures. Most importantly, he saw his role as protector of the Fenrir bloodline, a responsibility that stretched far beyond this single pup to encompass a destiny that would unfold over generations. The young one he had saved would grow to become a bridge between the world of gods and mortals, and Ragnar would be there to ensure its safety until that destiny could be fulfilled. "Do you accept this charge, Ragnar Ironwolf?" the white female asked, using his true name for the first time. "Will you forsake the warrior's rest in Valhalla to become our eternal guardian?" Ragnar looked around the circle of magnificent wolves, at the sacred stones pulsing with ancient power, at the small creature whose life he had saved at the cost of his own mortality. In all his years of exile and loneliness, he had never felt such a profound sense of belonging, of purpose. "I accept," he said, his voice ringing with conviction that transcended death itself. "I will guard this forest and all who dwell within it, for as long as the roots of Yggdrasil draw strength from the earth." The moment he spoke those words, the transformation completed itself in a blaze of silver light. His spirit form solidified into something that was both more and less than human, a being of pure will and purpose, unbound by the limitations of mortal flesh, yet retaining all the skills and determination that had made him a legendary warrior. The wolves' howling reached a crescendo that seemed to shake the very foundations of reality. Birds erupted from every tree in a symphony of wings and calls, while throughout the forest, every creature, great and small, paused in recognition of the momentous change that had just occurred. As the light faded and the howling subsided, Ragnar stood transformed in the center of the sacred circle. His new form towered slightly taller than his mortal body had been, wreathed in an aura of silver light that pulsed with each beat of his immortal heart. His weapons had transformed as well. His axe now gleamed with the same ethereal radiance as his spirit, while his father's sword had become a blade of pure starlight. The white female approached him once more, her massive head bowing in a gesture of respect that honored his sacrifice and his new status. "Welcome, guardian of the forgotten forest. Your watch begins now and will not end until the final winter claims the world tree itself." The pup, his pup, as he now thought of it, bounded over to his feet, its transformed nature evident in every movement. The runic markings along its sides had stabilized into intricate patterns that told the story of its divine heritage, while its blue eyes now held depths that spoke of wisdom beyond its years. As the pack began to disperse back into the forest, each wolf pausing to acknowledge their new protector with a respectful nod, Ragnar felt a completeness he had never experienced in mortal life. His exile was over, but more than that, he had found his true calling at last. The sun climbed higher into the morning sky, its light filtering through the canopy to dapple the forest floor with shifting patterns of gold and shadow. Somewhere in the distance, a raven called 3 times, Odin's messengers carrying word of the transformation to the halls of Asgard. Ragnar knelt beside the pup, his immortal hand stroking the creature's mystical fur. "Come, little one," he said, his voice carrying the authority of his new nature. Let me show you the wonders of our domain. We have much to explore together, and eternity stretches before us. Together, the spirit guardian and his divine charge walked deeper into the forgotten forest, beginning a partnership that would become legend among the trees. Behind them, the sacred clearing fell silent once more, but the stones continued to pulse with gentle blue light, a beacon for those who might one day need the protection of the immortal wolf guardian. The morning mist swirled around them as they disappeared between the ancient pines, and the forest itself seemed to sigh with contentment. Balance had been restored, honor had been rewarded, and the eternal watch had begun. 300 years later, the village storyteller's voice drops to a whisper as the fire burns low in the great hall. Children lean forward on their wooden benches, eyes wide with wonder and just a touch of fear. Even now, the old man continues, his weathered hands gesturing toward the dark windows where the forgotten forest stretches beyond sight. Travelers speak of a figure glimpsed between the trees. Some say he appears when the wolves are threatened. Others claim he guides lost souls to safety before vanishing like morning mist. A young girl raises her hand tentatively. Is he real, grandfather? The wolf guardian? The storyteller smiles, his eyes twinkling with secrets accumulated over decades of wandering. Last winter, my own nephew was caught in a blizzard while hunting near the forest's edge. He tells of a tall figure, wreathed in silver light, who led him to shelter, accompanied by a great wolf, with eyes like blue stars and markings that glowed in the darkness. He pauses, letting the silence stretch until it fills every corner of the hall. When dawn broke and the storm passed, my nephew found himself safely sheltered in a cave he had never seen before. His tracks led to that place, but of his mysterious guide, there was no trace save the faint scent of pine and ancient magic. The children exchange glances filled with equal parts excitement and apprehension. Outside, the wind picks up, causing the shutters to creak and the flames to dance. They say, the storyteller concludes, banking the fire for the night, that honor such as his can never truly die, that somewhere in those ancient woods, Ragnar Ironwolf still keeps his eternal watch, guardian of all who cannot guard themselves. As the hall empties and the village settles into sleep, none notice the pair of blue eyes watching from the tree line, or the silver figure standing patient and eternal beside his mystical companion. The watch continues, as it has for 3 centuries, as it will for centuries more. In the forgotten forest, legends never die. They simply wait for those brave enough to seek them out. Thank you for joining us on this journey into Nordic mythology. If this tale of honor, sacrifice, and eternal guardianship resonated with you, please like this video, subscribe for more legendary stories from the age of Vikings and gods, and comment below with your thoughts about Ragnar's transformation. Have you ever encountered legends of guardian spirits in your own culture? I'd love to hear your stories. Until our next adventure into the realm of myth and magic, may your path be guided by honor and courage.